Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the virtual Ossining Public Library. I'm Diana Lennon, Head of Adult Services, and this is a virtual potluck. We're so excited to have you here. And I want to introduce Ashley Covelli, who's going to tell you about herself and what she does, and we can talk about dates of upcoming programs too, Ashley. So
Yes, and I usually put that in my notes, and this time I didn't. But for those of you who don't know me, I think I know most of you, but my name is Ashley. I live here in Austin with a musician, which is why there's music gear back here. I'm surrounded by music gear and piles of cookbooks, but I feel like that kind of speaks to my life. I've been writing about food and recipes at Big Flavors from a Tiny Kitchen since 2006, and I've been doing this program with the Ossining Public Library since the beginning of last year. So every month we have a theme. This month it's eggs, and we'll do one cookbook discussion where we talk about different cookbooks that involve whatever the theme is. It's not always an ingredient. Sometimes it's a cuisine. It could be anything. And also, if you ever have theme requests, always happy to work with those. And then the second time during the month that we meet, we do a cooking class. So I cook from my kitchen. You're welcome to cook along if you'd like. You don't have to. You can come and hang out and watch, ask questions, have a snack, have a drink, whatever. This month, the cooking class is on Tuesday, March 22nd at 6 p.m. Eastern. And I don't have the recipe cards up yet, but you can, I think, register and you'll get them later. We're going to make little mini quiches because I was really determined. I was like, I want to do quiches in a class, but it takes a little bit longer for it to fully cook and set. So I do these ones where you roll out pieces of bread. So I tested it again last week and I used brioche and I rolled them out and you stuff those, you brush them with butter and you stuff those in the muffin tin. And then it's like a spinach and cheddar, but you can do any ingredients you like, but they're really good and they're kind of like fun party sized. So we'll be making that and probably like a salad or something to go alongside. So something to make while they're in the oven. And you should have received a PDF that has cookbook recommendations for tonight's discussion. I always bring home stacks and stacks of cookbooks from the library, but I always encourage you, if you have a cookbook that you'd like to talk about or a favorite recipe or restaurant or resource that's based on the theme that you want to chat about, always happy. Feel free to chime in, unmute yourself or type in the chat, or you could do a little hand raisey thing. Very laid back. I can talk about cookbooks forever. And like one that, so Cynthia, I sometimes take the books that I liked the most from the class and she gets to check them out next. So now every month I'm like, okay, what's the Cynthia pick going to be this month? And this month, it's so good. I'm not going to do it first. We got to build suspense. It's so good. I could have probably I might renew it. But it's really good. I could have probably yapped for an hour about it. But anyway, and then in the PDF, there's cookbook recommendations for, I think, 3 pages. The 4th page has a bunch of different recipes from my website that involve eggs. And that if you want to try any of those. And then the last page, I usually try to put local resources. So this month, it's restaurants that I think have good egg dishes that are local. One I haven't tried it, but I've heard really, really good things. It's called Janiello's Specialty Foods on Pleasantville Road in Briarcliff. Have any of you tried that? Apparently, their menu looks great, and they have a lot of breakfast sandwiches. And the other thing of note, did I put it on here? Yeah, in Cortland, it's kind of like Yorktown-y Cortland, Rob's Poultry and Farm Supplies. They sell farm fresh eggs, and it's I want to say they're $5 a dozen, which if you're not local to this area might not sound extremely inexpensive, but farmers market eggs here are a lot. I want to say at least $10 or $12 usually for 1 dozen eggs. You can get 3 dozen for $12, I think, or $15. It's really great. And they also sell chickens if you keep chickens in your yard or you have the chicken feed. And I ran into a friend yesterday at a restaurant, and I'm going to do an experiment with this later. She gave me some fresh eggs, and she got her chickens from Rob's poultry shop. So I was like, this is so interesting because I like to buy eggs from there. And I have one that's 1 step removed because it's from a chicken that she got there. So anyway, there's an experiment on freshness testing in one of these books, and that egg was laid yesterday. So I want to test their science. Okay, so the first cookbook is going to seem kind of silly, but that's exactly why I picked it. It's called The Green Eggs and Ham Cookbook. So this author, it says, Yachts and Pots and Schlotz's Knots, Who Roast Beast, Fritz Fed Fred Food Feast, Moose Juice and Goose Juice, recipes inspired by Dr. Seuss. So even the cover is a rhyme. And they legitimately took recipes that are mentioned in different Dr. Seuss books or dishes and turned them into recipes. And she wanted them to actually be edible. So like for the green eggs and ham, the egg is coated in avocado. So it's a fried egg. She didn't want to use food coloring. And then the roast beast, you can see it down there. It is, oh no, sorry, this is the ham. It's got a coating of apple jelly, tomatillos, and then cilantro leaves, minced and parsley leaves are stuck onto the outside to make it green without it being like a weird combination of ingredients. So it's kind of like a sweet and salty thing. Some of the recipes are like not quite recipes. It's just kind of cute to make it an actual food item. But I thought it's interesting that they wanted it to actually be from all these different books from Dr. Seuss. They combed through, I think they said all 44 Dr. Seuss books and found they're full of wacky foods that they wanted to bring to life. And so each of the pages starts with like an excerpt from whichever book it's from. So it gives you the context of where they mention the food item. So let's see if I can find a fun one. That's not too much. Yeah.
Is that new or is that an older book?
Well, let me see. It is from 2006.
Okay.
So, and this one is from the Tuckahoe Library. So I like to peruse the cookbook sections in person. And I actually did that at Greenberg and met Joanna in person last week. I was in the area. But you can also go on the website, and any of the books in the Westchester County Library System, you can have them delivered to the library that's closest to you. So I got this one from Tuckahoe, but I picked it up in Ossining, which is very convenient. So like this recipe is for flapjack, flappers, flapjacks. And it's from the book, Oh Say, Can You Say? And then there's a little excerpt at the front. Or if you think you don't like cops caps, flapjack flappers, or cupcake cooks caps, maybe you're one of those choosy chaps who likes kooky captain's caps, perhaps. And so then in their intro, they're saying, wear a kooky captain's cap instead of a flapjack flapper's cap to flip flapjacks filled with bananas and peanut butter, or flip these flapjacks completely capless. And so they kind of try to make it a little whimsical. And then they actually have photos of the recipes so you can see them in person. And they integrate the illustrations from the Dr. Seuss books. I just thought it was a really cute, especially, not only if you have kids, but especially if you have kids, you could make pink ink drink. And just ones like this are really simple. It's like fresh or frozen berries, milk, strawberries, and honey. So they're pretty basic recipes for the most part. And this one was really interesting. I saw it, I almost didn't check it out. And I was like, no, this is just ridiculous enough that I think it's like a fun one to talk about. And the one recipe in here that I was like, this seems like a bit of a stretch, but it was entertaining. So it's about Daisy Head Maisie, and that's a picture of her from the book of the same name. So Daisy had burgers and Daisy had drinks, Daisy had stockings and Daisy had sinks, Daisy had buttons and Daisy had bows. Maisie was famous, the star of her shows. So this recipe is to make big juicy hamburgers the Daisy Head way, that is with a gingerbread daisy dessert stuck right on top. So they actually have a photo, they have a template for you to make the cookies too. Sorry, my lighting's not great. And it's like a double-decker burger with a gingerbread cookie that looks like a daisy on top. But it's ridiculous, but it's also kind of adorable. And I can see maybe somebody bribing their kid, like, if you eat your 2 hamburgers, you can have this adorable cookie up top. So, and then, you know, one of them like I don't know why I can't say this one. Fritz Fed Fred Food Feast. It's like, it looks like a jar of like a bucket of pickles, but it's actually teaching you how to make some pickles. So I guess it's just very green things for that book. And then some of the illustrations, they combined like Schlotz's knots. It's got this little illustrated guy and his tail turns into these little knotted. So these are stretching the dough into long droopy ropes will give you plenty of tail to twist and shape into like Schlotz like knots. So it's basically like it's breadstick dough, but they're calling them pretzels. But it's kind of, I mean, it's kind of funny. And you can just go with rustic if you're not good at shaping things that was intentionally misshapen. So while I don't know that I would necessarily cook from this book, I would show it to my kid for sure. And if he wanted to try something, I think it would be fun. And the roast beast, I thought this was interesting. That I feel like everybody knows the roast beef from The Grinch Who Stole Christmas, or How the Grinch Stole Christmas. So it's actually a chicken whose dramatic who look is made by tucking mushrooms under its skin. Just the thing to make the Grinch flinch, for the Grinch hates all things who. So you put them under it to make kind of like a bumpy skin. There's no picture of it. There's just the illustration from the book, but that's how they decided to make the skin bumpy, is tuck stuff under the skin. I thought that was kind of cute. It's just a very different than anything we've talked about in this group for sure. So that is my first little off the wall. This is not Cynthia, the Cynthia's book choice of the month, trademark registered. But a very fun one.
Yeah, thanks for looking out for me, Ashley.
Yeah. Because I'm sure you already own this one. So before I move on, does anybody else have any that they bought or brought to share, or any egg recipes they want to talk about? Silly or not, does not have to be silly.
I think I am just looking for different egg recipes. You know what I mean? Like, I'm tired of the omelet and the scrambled eggs and the, you know what I mean? Like something a little different, you know. That would definitely do it. The Dr. Seuss one, but maybe a little different. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like mostly the eggs was in the title, and the green eggs and ham one on that one. Would different be like perhaps deviled eggs? Because there's an entire book of
talk about deviled eggs. Yeah.
Oh yes. So I love deviled eggs. I think I put 1, if not 2 deviled egg recipes on. In the PDF, I put a no mayo deviled egg recipe that I used plain Greek yogurt for. And there are surprisingly a lot of mayo haters out there. So if you are one of those, or if you know one of those, you can use plain Greek yogurt, and it works really well. Sometimes you need to add like a little sugar or something to, if you're using the plain yogurt, because mayo can, or Miracle Whip, depending what's in the original recipe that you're going off of, it might need like a little something. But and I have a French inspired deviled egg recipe. But this book is 50, it's just called Deviled Eggs, 50 recipes from simple to sassy. And the inside cover, they did a lot of like playing on like jokes about like deviling and the devil and whatever, which I thought was like, we don't need the jokes. Like deviled eggs speak for themselves. I feel like it does well without it. But you know, some say the devils you know are better than the devils you don't. Well, on these pages there are plenty of both, and they're all wickedly delicious. So she's got she's got all sorts of information, like hard facts about hard cooked eggs to start out with. And I find a lot of these books that focus on eggs have tips for boiling eggs, tips for peeling eggs. They all vary, and I feel like it's just trial and error, and sometimes eggs are a little persnickety, I feel like would be a good word for them. Like you can have one, like a batch of eggs, and some of them peel easily and some don't. I know typically the fresher the egg, the harder it is to peel. And if you do have like an Instant Pot or a pressure cooker, steam cooking them can help that a little bit. So there are tips for hard cooking eggs at the beginning, and then she goes into So kind of a traditional section, good old eggs. And that's kind of your typical like cousins recipes, mom's recipes. So you've got like a standard Ma's deviled eggs, and it's like nothing kind of fancy or frilly. And then each of the sections has these little egg timers for tip boxes, which I thought was kind of cute. There's like different color of egg timers. And it tells you different things about eggs. So let me find a good one. So this one on the pimento cheese deviled eggs, which I love cheese. I love pimentos. I've never had, is there actually, yeah, there's cheddar cheese and chopped pimentos in here. I would definitely try it. I don't know that I've ever had cheese in a deviled egg before. It doesn't sound, I don't know. I would try it though. But so the tip on this says eggshells are so porous that they will allow the egg to absorb flavors from nearby items. Placing a truffle or less pleasantly an onion in or near the carton will infuse the eggs with that flavor. I did not know that. I know that, usually there's a separate section in your refrigerator for eggs. And I found in mine, in the door, we can keep not just a 12 dozen of eggs, it can fit an 18 pack, and on the side, a separate 6, but they have to be like really slim cartons. But yeah, so we go through a lot of eggs in my house. But yeah, I've never owned a whole truffle to put in my egg container. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. Like through the shell, I wouldn't think through the shell. I always thought it just meant if it was peeled, it would come through. So there's not a lot of pictures in here. Midwestern style deviled eggs. There's, let's see, Yo Mama's deviled eggs. And they're saying because everybody says that their mom makes the best deviled eggs. And this one is her mom's. It's like the basic mayo, paprika flavors that everybody kind of grew up with. I don't know, I grew up in the Midwest, and I feel like deviled eggs were huge there. Were they as big elsewhere?
I grew up in New England. I feel like they were, yeah.
Okay. Because I'm all about keeping them. I even have like a deviled egg. Oh no, Rachel Ray has a deviled potato salad with eggs in it that's really good too. Kind of like best of both worlds.
I'm going to give you a little piece of Ashley trivia. She has containers to carry deviled eggs.
Sure do. Yeah, I brought some to Cynthia's house for a party that she had, and I have my grandma's, I should have brought that up here. I have my grandma's vintage Tupperware. It's probably full of all sorts of like BPAs and things that I try to avoid now, but I don't care because I love this piece. It's got handles and it's got a cover, so you can actually make the deviled eggs and you can cover it like airtight and not damage the tops that you filled so prettily. And then I have several trays. Also, I have like a big long red one. I have 2 egg-shaped ones. I really like deviled eggs a lot. But I'm like pretty much just like the classic style. The French-inspired ones that I have on my on the recipe sheet have like tarragon and Dijon mustard, and they're like just a little bit different. But I find like you can do so much just dressing up the top of a deviled egg that you don't need to necessarily like go crazy inside. But so like this one, she's got springtime herb delights, and they have parsley, dill, and chives. So those ones are just kind of like packed full of different herbs. These are kind of the more mild ones up front. Then the second section is slightly cracked. So these, I guess, are like a little bit more interesting, like flavor combinations. Those ones are called Blue Devils, and they have bacon and blue cheese. I feel like, so I like blue cheese and eggs and bacon on a salad. So I feel like that would work. But just, I guess, I don't know. I don't think I've ever had it mixed in together. There is this one. I have issue with this recipe only because I don't understand. You discard the yolks or set them aside for another use and fill them with avocados. I get it if you're trying to avoid egg yolks, I guess, because of the cholesterol maybe, but like, give me something to do with them. Don't tell me to throw them out. Spinach bacon deviled eggs. And the author collected the recipes from a bunch of people, so it's not like one person came up with 50 deviled egg recipes. which I think is worth mentioning. Here we go with a little more like different. So devil's food eggs, and these ones have the egg yolks with creme fraiche, but creme fraiche, butter, cocoa powder, brown sugar, salt, and chocolate. I know this one. I'm so curious if somebody tries any of these, like what, like I don't want to make a whole batch of it. I would try one if somebody made it. Then we have a section on going uptown. So you've got like a little fancier one like crabby eggs. These I would definitely eat. They have crab meat in and on them, and I think they're sprinkled with Old Bay. Oh, they're not sprinkled with Old Bay, but they could be, make it a little more like Maryland. But it's got like garlic and capers and celery seeds and lemon juice inside. They've got some with lox. This one has curry powder in it. And two, just seeing like the different ways to either scoop or pipe the filling can always make it look different. I like using either a cookie scoop, you can just kind of like plop a really easy round on it, or a piping bag. Like if you have one with a star tip, it looks really pretty. So yeah, this book, there's some interesting, like I would want to try some of these for sure. This one was interesting. I thought this one it's got chipotles and orange zest. So there's some interesting like different flavor combinations. I feel like this would be good with like a cocktail, like an old fashioned or something, like have a little, I don't know, just interesting. This one's got salsa mashed in it and they put crushed tortilla chips on top. So there's all sorts of interesting things that I would have never necessarily thought. This is the one I think I would be most likely to try. This one's called Buffalo Horns, and it's got cooked chicken and buffalo wing sauce in it, and then celery and Tabasco and butter. So it's kind of like wings-ish, but deviled eggs. And then I think those are most of the photos. Yeah, so I thought this was a fun collection, very like interesting. I feel like I would want to scale, I think most of these are made for 6 eggs, 12 eggs. I would probably like scale it back just so if the recipe was easily cut downable. Recommended online. Instead, store eggs in the main part of the fridge on a shelf, preferably toward the back of the refrigerator where it's coldest and the temperature is more stable. Oh, that's interesting. What site was that from, Chris? I'm just curious if it was like a random website or if it was like a Cook's Illustrated. We've tested every square inch of a refrigerator and this is like the key place to put them.
Actually, I have, hi, good evening. I have read that before, and so I just looked it up and picked, one of the first sites that I saw.
So there's a consensus, which is good.
Yeah, in other words, because then the one below it says you may be under the common misconception that eggs should be stored in the door of your refrigerator, but the truth is blah, blah, the same idea. And by the way, just because manufacturers put the egg trays there, it doesn't necessarily mean that the refrigerator people, thought it out a lot either.
You mean
just
not everything is
it's narrow and it's like, oh, the eggs could go here.
Yeah. Well, I was trying to think of what else would actually work in that section because I had bought a reusable 18-holder egg carton, but it didn't fit in the door of my refrigerator. And I was like, is there anything else I could put there that I wouldn't be afraid would roll out? But I didn't. But yeah, that's really...
So I think that, if we're talking about what might be suitable for that part of this refrigerator, the kinds of items where they say store in a dry, cool place or in your refrigerator. In other words, those things, even if they have a little variation in the temperature, they would be better able to tolerate it,
Yeah, that makes sense. I think the problem with my refrigerator's egg door is that it's like a flat shelf and then it's got a door that comes down, so there's not much of a lip here. So I'm afraid that opening and closing something would fall out and likely break, because I feel like most of the stuff in the fridge is glass.
Yeah, you know what I want for my freezer? You know how some of the like minivans have a cargo net in the back?
Mm-hmm.
I need a cargo net for my freezer.
I think you should Shark Tank that. I think that's a great idea. Yeah. Okay. My mother-in-law puts her eggs in a like a not a Tupperware, but like an open container out of the carton. So there's nothing like cushioning in between. I think she stuffs paper towels in there and stuff. But I always thought, oh, that's going to absorb smells from the refrigerator just because they're open. But at like one little flimsy piece of cardboard does much more, I guess. Probably not.
Yeah.
So, okay. So let's see. I want to make sure. This was my favorite book. This is the Cynthia pick for this month. Literally, if there's anything you want to know about eggs, and even if you don't want to cook recipes for it, this book is from Lucky Peach. It's called All About Eggs. So it's pretty big, and it's like a magazine in book form with like all sorts of scientific information, historical information. There's a section they don't really have recipe photos necessarily in the recipe pages of the book, but there's a whole section in the middle full of all of the photos for the different recipes. And I think at first I was like, oh, there's no photos with the recipes, but I think it's kind of nice because you don't get distracted by the pretty photo. So I found myself like reading the description of some of the recipes, and then when I got to this section, I'd see like, here's a good example. One of these egg dishes, I was like, that is not at all what I thought it would have looked like. And so it's kind of cool to see it like that. Here's that one. It's like a loaf. I'm gonna find some of the dishes I was familiar with, but this book, where did that photo go? This book talks about the history of eggs. Like you can learn everything from like here's one I was thinking of. This recipe, I wouldn't have necessarily thought it would have looked like that with the egg tucked in. This one is the Ainsley eggs, and that's a British or Welsh recipe. So all you see on the recipe spread is text, and it walks you through, and the intros, they're written by a bunch of different people. So it's not like one author narrating the whole book. There's a lot of humor in it. So like this for the Ainsley eggs says, Ainsley eggs is that old school British meal that is quintessentially British because it's at least 50% potato and frequently devoid of spices. In this dish, which is known as, and then they spell it out in Welsh, which there's no way I could read that. Hard-boiled eggs are nestled in a leek-studded mash, i.e. mashed potatoes, and covered in a cheesy sauce blistered from the grill, i.e. broiler. And so it gives you like the whole rundown of like what the recipe is, but I just, looking at the photo, I wouldn't have pictured it that way. So this book will tell you, it takes you through like the journey of an egg, how it becomes an egg through a chicken. There's really cute illustrations in it. There are essays on like people who collect different types of eggs. There's these are like throughout the book illustrations of different types of eggs, like literally drawn with crayon, but there's a penny and a nickel for scale, or maybe a quarter, I guess a penny and a quarter for scale. But they talk about the different types of eggs that we eat. So I hadn't heard of this one. Fairy is a yolkless chicken egg, often laid by a young hen, usually has a rough shell, also called witch egg, wind egg, and fart egg. It really spooked people in the olden days. In the 1600s, they believed these tiny eggs, they called them cock's eggs, and believed they would hatch glittering-eyed monsters called basilisks, especially if you incubated your egg under a toad. So there's like all these really interesting like historical tidbits about different things. It talks about quail eggs, chicken eggs, which are the focus of this book, but they just kind of give you other information. And it talks about commercial eggs. Peewee eggs are 1.25 ounces, which I don't think I've ever seen those at a store. Small are 1.5 ounces, medium are 1.75 ounces, large are 2 ounces, extra large are 2.25, and jumbo are 2.5, which doesn't sound like a big difference, but I think in the like when you're especially baking, the size of the egg will make a big difference. So most recipes in the US, I think, call for large eggs. But it talks about duck eggs, turkeys, goose, gull, ostrich. I don't even know how to say this one. Guillemot. They're seabirds found in the Arctic Circle and North Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. Talks about their eggs. So there's like a ton of information on that. And then there are these really interesting essays with not, I mean, there's not much illustration wise to see, but this one is about tart to tart and egg tart evolution. And the author grew up in Hong Kong and talks about how she would have dim sum and be so excited for the egg tart at the end, and how the Cantonese egg tart, how it was like perfectly symmetrical and beautifully cooked, and like all this detail about what she loved about them. And then found out that they actually were kind of newer to Hong Kong, and they are similar to things from other parts of the world. And so you go on this like journey of from Macau and Portugal and all these different places where the different types of egg tarts are. And there's a couple of pictures of some of the different types. And like the things that she found so wonderful about the Hong Kong one, like that symmetricalness and the even color. On a Portuguese one, blistered and kind of wonky is actually really good. So it was just, it's getting some interesting perspective and like cultural context around a lot of different foods that I thought was really interesting. And they travel to like all the different parts of the world. So there's a section on South America where they put an egg in it. And I thought this was a cute little map of like a map with eggs and veggies and meat on it. But they talk about like Latin Americans not only put egg on it, they also put eggs in things. When stuffed inside meat, dough, or vegetables, hard-boiled eggs serve a multitude of purposes, helping stretch expensive ingredients, adding texture and luxurious flavor. Plus, they look cool. So they talk about different types like empanadas, pastel de choclo, torta pascualina, matambre. That sounds really good. It's an Argentinian steak stuffed with vegetables and eggs, and means in Spanish hunger killer, which I mean sounds like it would be, but I love the idea of like stretching something with eggs. I thought that was really smart.
Yeah, I was impressed. I've been adding eggs a lot to other things, right? Like when I was on my soup binge, and it's really common to just put I guess it's a, what would you call it, like a 7-minute egg, like
Mhm.
a mostly cooked, but the ramen, the broth is so hot that it continues to cook it. And it just adds such a beautiful, I was skeptical, but it adds such a beautiful creaminess. It's just like texture to it. And then that cookbook that you brought over, Ashley, to me, and everyone, we have a special relationship because I'm not getting to the library very often these days. So that's why Ashley's dropping off cookbook.
Yes. I'm a cookbook mule and I'm okay with it.
Yeah. But how many of those bowls had either a fried egg or a boiled egg in them too, just to add that creaminess. It was kind of like excellent mayonnaise added to your salad or something, right? It really does add a lot of texture to it.
And it can, like with some of the dishes, it can almost make like a sauce too. Like if something is a little dry, like mixing it around, like Korean bibimbap, when you like mix that egg in with everything and it just kind of like brings it all together and makes it extra luscious.
Extra luscious. Yeah.
That I think there was a section in this book also about like over the top, like we like taking eggs that are already rich and luxurious and mixing them with like mayo, which is also made of eggs and already like rich, and just kind of going over the top of things. So this one, there's different countries, everything's represented. We got England, the Middle East, Mexico, Sri Lanka, France. They talk about the history of the Scotch egg, which is apparently, so it's if you're not familiar, I always thought was just a hard cooked egg surrounded by sausage and deep fried, which I might have put a recipe for that on in the PDF also. But it started out not that way. And so it was interesting to read about like, let's see, back then the egg would have come from a poulette, a young hen, which isn't really in the business of laying proper eggs yet, and would have been much smaller than eggs are now. The covering would have been made from force meat, lean meat ground up and bound with fat, rather than the sausage we use these days. It would have been heavily seasoned with pepper and mace. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Yeah, there's so many interesting tidbits. And what page is this experiment on? Okay, 46. This is how to tell if your eggs are fresh, and they have 4 different methods. So one is break it open and look at the white. And this is obviously if you're not doing like an egg that needs to stay in the shell. If it's cloudy, it's fresh. If it's clear, it's still okay to eat. If it looks a little pinkish, it's bad. Unless it's a tinamou egg, which I guess I could look back and see what is that. They're found in Mexico, South America, and Central America. They lay eggs that are brilliantly colored, glossy, and iridescent. We aren't sure why they're so beautiful, but some say it's to draw the attention of the male tinamous and signal them to incubate the eggs. I've never heard of, we don't have those here in Ossining. It talks about looking at the yolk. If it sits up and looks perky, it's fresh. And if it flattens out, it's not that fresh. So that's like this illustration. If it's up a little bit more, that means it's more fresh than if not. This is I brought up a bowl of water. So method 2 is drop it into a glass bowl full of water. As an egg gets older, the water inside it evaporates. The water is replaced by air, or in the case of a rotting egg, smelly gases. If it sinks and lies horizontally on the bottom of the bowl, it's very fresh, 1 to 3 days old. And I know this egg was laid yesterday, so that's why I want to test it against this egg that I had from the store. If it sinks but bobs or stands diagonally, it's quite fresh, about a week old. If it sinks but stands vertically, it's pretty fresh, about 2 weeks old. This is a good age for hard boiling. If it floats, it's a month or older. It's not only not fresh, it's bad. Don't eat this egg. So this is my friend's egg that was laid yesterday. Okay, so sinks and lies horizontally, is very fresh, 1 to 3 days old. Yes. Let's check out my store-bought. This is not from Rob's Poultry Shop. This one's from Stop and Shop. See now that's a little diagonal. See, this is why I like to experiment with things. There's no way this is 1 to 3 days old, because I bought it at least a week ago. And that's when I bought it from the store. So, okay. But of an interesting note, my friend who gave me the egg told me if you don't rinse them when you get fresh eggs, they have a coating. I can't remember the name for it. You can leave it on the counter for like up to a month. But before you eat it, wash the shell, and then you can use it. If you wash the eggs off, because they have feathers and whatever, but they have this coating. If you wash that coating off, you need to refrigerate it, because I guess it somehow protects the egg from maybe like the absorbing smells from the truffles that you have in your refrigerator. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
It's definitely true though about if they float, they're not good.
Yeah,
My brother-in-law's a farmer, and he told me that a long time ago.
Yeah, I would believe his thing, but yeah, I 1 to 3 days. If it sinks but bobs or stands diagonally, it's quite fresh. Yeah, so I don't know. At least all my eggs are in good condition, so that's good. There is also in this book, it's literally everything about eggs. So this has like a section of the egg carton glossary, so words that you'll find on egg cartons and if they're like what they actually mean, because sometimes it's misleading. So the definitions of like cage-free, free range, no added hormones, local, organic, certified humane, animal welfare approved, and all that type of stuff. There's tons of articles, just really interesting, like different perspectives, different, there's stuff on like Fabergé eggs, like an egg thief. There's an interview with the world's fastest omelet maker, and he has 3 Guinness World Records, all related to omelet making. He was the spokesman for the American Egg Board for over 40 years, travels the world talking about eggs. Just like people, I was not expecting that when I got this book. I thought it was just going to be egg recipes and some information. There's an entire section on omelets. And so I like that it's a world perspective. So you're not just getting like a Denver omelet or a California omelet. There are Taiwanese oyster omelets, China cafes, egg foo young, which apparently there was like a big 3 Americanized Chinese dishes, chop suey, chow mein, and egg foo young. And they've now been bumped, but that was like one of the most popular, and my husband loves it. So I'm gonna probably try to make this. Some of the recipes are a little complicated, but like it's this opposite end of the green eggs and ham cookbook as far as complication level. There's chicken with eggs tagine. There's an article on why we eat eggs for breakfast. This one is called The Hard-Boiled Detective, and I believe by law, eggs in this country must be washed by the seller and thus must be refrigerated. Yeah. I think at a farmer's market though, I guess they do still wash them. I don't know. And the laws might vary too based on where you live, but yeah, I know I tend to refrigerate mine just because I want them to last a little bit longer too. There was one article in here about this guy who decided to really find out the easiest way to peel eggs without them sticking. And he did an experiment. Apparently, he's called the Hard-Boiled Detective. There's a certain pH level that if the egg white reaches it, it's easy to peel. So he does this whole thing with like an alkaline solution and soaking it in vinegar to lessen the thickness of the shell. It's crazy, but it's interesting. So it's like this book I thought was a really interesting read. And I haven't read all of it yet, but then you have the recipe picture menu that I showed, like that's one of the egg tarts, and it just kind of goes through all these different egg dishes throughout the world, and it tells underneath, the writing is really small, but it tells you like this one's an egg curry, and it tells you what page it's on, so you can kind of see. And this kind of reminded me of like when you go to a Chinese takeout type of restaurant when they have the pictures up on the menu, like all in big blocks. But you can tell even from the pictures how they're from all different parts of the world. This one is a Persian dish called Cuckoo Sabzi. I've made it before. It's made with a ton of fresh herbs. So it's like this big frittata. I've made it from a Persian cookbook. I don't have my own recipe for it, but that one's on page 69. The intro for each of them kind of gives like a little context with the area of the world that it's from. So they say Iranians treat herbs not as a seasoning, but as a vegetable. Copious fresh herbs are the foundation of many Persian dishes, especially in the case in spring when Persian New Year starts and pulls people out of their homes to go on picnics, where Cuckoo Sabzi is always part of the spread. It's a frittata-like dish of fresh greens bound by just enough egg to hold it together. And that one is like, it is a ton of flavor. I've never bought so many herbs to make one dish before in my life, but it was really good. Like you fry the herbs in oil and then you add the eggs in there. So this book, super interesting, super different. They go through like desserts and all that. There are quite a few recipes in it, but I just like the kind of whole world perspective, and the articles are really interesting. And if you don't love egg recipes, you would still, I think, enjoy reading it. So 751. I think, did we talk about a Cook's Illustrated book last month? A different Cook's Illustrated, was it Cook's America's Test Kitchen maybe? This one is Cook's Illustrated All-Time Best Brunch. And I find with all of their books, they're super well researched. They do, like, I feel like Cook's Illustrated, America's Test Kitchen, there's a couple brands like that that really thoroughly test out the recipes and give you a lot of information for success in the kitchen, instead of just like putting the recipe out there and leaving you kind of on your own. So this brunch book, there's an entire section on eggs, and the intro tells you why this recipe works. So like we've got eggs benedict. I have is it on there? The waffle pulled pork eggs benedict recipe that I put on the list. If you only want a hollandaise recipe, that's really easy and you don't have to be all fussy about it and you have a blender, I have a recipe for that in there that's like, it comes together so much easier than a lot of ones that I've seen. Baked eggs Florentine. Scrambled eggs with goat cheese, arugula, and sun-dried tomatoes.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, I love stuff like this too for like cleaning out your fridge kind of.
Yeah.
Migas, it's like got tortillas in there. And this was interesting. So for example, on this one, why this recipe works. Migas is classic Tex-Mex fare, combining tender scrambled eggs with flavorful bites of peppers and onions and crispy, chewy crunch of fried tortillas and a supremely satisfying scramble. Shallow frying the tortillas rather than simply opening a bag of chips, as some recipes do, proved essential to adding texture and deep corn flavor to the dish. And they have a whole bunch more, but they really like tell you why their version of this recipe is like the one kind of. And I think that's helpful because, you know, you might think like, oh, well, you certainly could just buy them, but it does make sense that it would kind of infuse the flavor into the rest of the dish. They have a family size cheese omelet that you make like a huge one at once. And then you cut it into individual pieces. I've never done one of these egg roulades, but I would love to try. You cook it on you grease a rimmed baking sheet and then you put parchment paper on it. And so once you pour the egg mixture and bake it, and then when you remove it, you sprinkle cheese on top and then you use the parchment paper side and you roll it. And that's how you get that. It's like those Swiss
rubbery, Ashley. Do you think it gets like kind of?
I think it could if you overcook it, for sure. So I feel like
I'm trying to picture that. Yeah,
you would have to, because I'm picturing like, you know, like at Japanese restaurants, or if you get sushi, they have I'm blanking on the name, tamago. It's like a little egg omelet. So you get like an egg, and it's a lot of times those are layered, but the way that they're layered, they make them really thin and they fold them over, and those don't tend to get rubbery. I feel like it might be the same. So this is saying like you bake it till the eggs are just set, about 9 minutes, rotating the baking sheet halfway through. So again, maybe on this is 12 large eggs. Maybe you could use a quarter sheet pan and use 6 eggs and try a smaller one just to see like how it's like. So Chris says, in the commercial egg industry, eggs are washed and also pasteurized. Pasteurization is the process of rapidly heating eggs to a certain temperature and time to kill bacteria, and is required by the USDA for all commercial egg products sold in the US, July 21st, 2020. It might depend on the size of the operation, which could explain the farmer's market. Yeah, I know. I think a lot of farmers markets, like I know like locally some farms that they definitely like rinse them. They're not too crazy about it because, you know, sometimes it's like, oh, the feathers add charm, you know, it came from a real chicken. But yeah, that makes sense. I think same with like milk, like you can't technically buy raw milk, but like some people do it. I don't know that I've ever had it. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense with the pasteurization.
I'm wondering if you have what your trick is for poached eggs so that they come out not like all spattered over the.
So I admittedly don't make them that often, but my husband does, and he doesn't do this, but I've read and I've seen other people do it where you crack the egg into like a little container and then you pour it through a fine mesh sieve to get rid of the really loose whites. And that's supposed to help. What's left in there is what's holding more tightly, because I think the like wispy parts are from the kind of like extra loose egg white. Yeah, I've seen that. And then you like when you take it out, I think you can put it like gently onto like a kitchen towel or paper towels to kind of catch any of the excess moisture.
I heard that you can add a little vinegar.
Vinegar to the water. Yep.
Water?
Yeah, I think that helps kind of tighten things up also. But yeah, I don't actually cook eggs a ton because he does it really well, and I like having an excuse to ask him to make me an omelet or something. But quiches that I love making. Sorry, were you saying something?
Yeah, Diana was saying that she wanted something different.
Mhm.
And I saw a recipe online where they did poached eggs, but they poached it in red wine. And they did
Oh.
like a twist on it, eggs benedict using that. They put like an English muffin and they put some kale. I don't know if there was anything in
Mm.
the kale. And then the wine poached egg on top.
Interesting.
That is interesting.
Again, I would,
Never seen anything like that.
yeah,
Waste of good wine.
yeah.
I bet it's for the leftover wine, if there is such a thing, right?
Oh, that's really funny. You know, different also, there was one of my friends used to have a restaurant in New York City, and it was his chef was showing me something he was playing around with called chicken fried egg. And I can't remember if he froze, I think he cracked the egg into a ramekin and froze it and then took it out and battered it as if you were making like fried chicken and then deep fried it. And I got to eat it and it was delicious. I can't remember now because it was several years ago. I can't remember now if he froze it raw or if he like partially cooked it and then did that. I can't remember, but it was really good. Dee Dee's Diner, and I'm not sure if they changed owners, but they have fried poached eggs that my husband really liked. I don't know if they still do, but they're like, it's a poached egg, but it's crispy and fried on the outside. So it's like different, not as healthy, but still delicious.
I put a link to that in the chat. And then also,
From Dessert for Two.
I was gonna tell you, when I was a kid and I would get sick, my mom would make creamed eggs, and you had it over toast, and she would just make kind of like a bechamel sauce, and then she would take boiled eggs and rough chop them and put them in the cream sauce and put it over toast, and it was so good.
Interesting.
You liked that? I remember my parents liking that, and I was like, that's gross. Sorry, Lori.
Is it?
Wow.
I think for me, it's like whenever the white isn't set, I get kind of like, so, but maybe the.
It's a boiled egg.
Oh, okay.
And you chop it up and put it in like a white sauce.
And like over toast, right? Like you
Yeah.
kind of.
Okay. Ooh, I would eat that like biscuits and gravy, but like that instead of the.
Yeah.
That's what it was like. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
that
it was
sounds
something that like when you'd been sick and couldn't eat stuff, it just really hit the spot because it was kind of, sort of bland,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah, because I remember she
I
gave
thought it
me,
was
she
really
asked, she asked me when I was sick once if I wanted she called it burnt toast and milk or something like that, or toast and milk, and I was like, yeah, and I didn't know she made it and then she put it in the milk because
yeah, I don't
so it was
like
like soggy. It was very weird, but I guess it makes you feel better. So I won't share any more books now. This one does have several more egg recipes that are good. And this book, honorable mention, Biscuit Head. There's a restaurant in Asheville, and it was really, really interesting. They have like gravy flights and stuff apparently, which sounds gloriously decadent, but they have some interesting egg recipes in here, and they talk about cooking different styles of eggs, and they have like biscuit recipes and all sorts of like everything looks gorgeous and very southern and heavy and indulgent, but this book was pretty interesting. There was also a quinoa scramble that I thought looked pretty interesting as something different. They like have cooked quinoa in with the scrambled eggs and veggies and a biscuit, for good measure. So that went by very fast for me. I'm like, I love talking about food with you. Thank you everybody for sharing your tips and also other egg dishes and former jobs at the beginning. That was really interesting. And if you want to join, the cooking class is on Tuesday, March 22nd, and we'll be doing mini quiches and something else to be determined, probably just like a quick salad dressing or something.
Yeah, at 6 p.m. Don't
At
forget.
6 p.m.,
That's at 6. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that we're not eating dinner too late. And then we have themes picked out for the next through June, and then we'll be off July and August, and then we'll come back in the fall. But if you're curious, if you're just ever so curious about the themes, it's going to be, didn't put it in there. Come on. I think sandwiches is one of them.
Sandwiches is one. Italian
Italian
is
is
one.
next month. And picnics.
And picnics. That's it.
Yeah.
Yep.
We're
I
trying
don't
to be
remember
like,
the order though. Yeah.
I think
Mhm.
Italian is next because then we're trying to go to more like seasonally appropriate, weather's cooling down,
Yeah.
kind of,
mhm.
yeah, less heat intensive cooking type of things.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Great.
yep. And these will all be going back to the library tomorrow. Cynthia, let me know if you want any of these delivered.
I like the choice. Yeah, I do. I like your choice.
Yeah.
And I think we just need to also just like celebrate. I mean, I use so many eggs and bake just like so many different ways and all the different meringues. I mean, the egg is amazing for its leavening power and for
Yeah.
meringue power. It's just like such a great ingredient in baking.
It is, and it can be used in every type, like sweet, savory, like everything. There's a really good chart in this book about replacements for eggs and what they're like the different types of substitutes that you can use for eggs. And so like if you can use them as leaveners, binders, emulsifiers, cake, brownies, scrambles, and there's like buttermilk, chia seeds, applesauce, agar, flax meal, soy lectin, tofu. So there's like a whole bunch of options and like what they're actually good to substitute instead of just saying like, oh yeah, just make a chia egg and use it for whatever. It tells you like what it's actually good to use it for, which I thought was really helpful if you're substituting an egg, which is interesting in an egg cookbook, but they're covering it. They're covering it all.
Covering all the bases.
Yeah.
That's great. That's fantastic. Thank you, Ashley. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, we hope we see you on the 22nd. Have some quiche. That sounds great. I'm going to stop the recording here.